So Summer Games Fest is right around the corner, and with that, some very exciting game announcements to look forward to. And seeing as this is more of an RPG, JRPG type of channel, naturally there is going to be a lot of RPGs I'm looking forward to, especially the ones that have been leaked for, years at this point, right? And I'd honestly be very happy if we got even one of these announcements at Summer Games Fest. Seeing as a lot of these games that I'm going to talk about we know have been in development for a while now, or again have been leaked and rumored for years. Final Fantasy IX is one of those games that have been heavily rumored since 2021. And ever since then, everybody has been wondering, speculating when Square Enix will finally let us see a glimpse of this game. Granted, game development can be very unpredictable and a lot can happen. A lot of obstacles can get in the way of development and getting the game where it needs to be. We've heard echoes that this remake was originally outsourced to a third-party studio before being brought back in-house. And I've talked about this with my previous videos on this rumored remake, but Square Enix has done this before. They are no strangers to outsourcing their games, especially when it comes to their flagship titles. And one of their biggest projects, Final Fantasy VII Remake, was one of those games to be outsourced before they eventually fired that studio and brought that game back in-house. I don't know why Square Enix does it. I get outsourcing with some of your games, but when it comes to, the big heavy hitters like Final Fantasy VII Remake, as well as now Final Fantasy IX Remake, if it is true and they did outsource this remake once again, I just think it's a very odd decision, especially when it didn't work out for you before. Additionally, we do have some more info, more evidence that shows that this 9 remake is a thing and that, maybe we can see it at Summer Games Fest. On the 25th anniversary website for Final Fantasy IX, we did get some newly added character art, as well as new character bios for a lot of the main cast of the game. First off, the new art looks very faithful, very one-to-one with how the original game looked with its art style. And if you read the character bios and tried to translate them, a lot of them read as if, they're trying to introduce these characters to people who have never played the game before. And I find this interesting because there's really no need to add character bios, character introductions if we're not going to revisit this game. And I also mentioned this in my previous videos that they make a very big deal out of this 9 remake, but when it comes to something like Final Fantasy VIII, they didn't even really celebrate that anniversary at all. Definitely very suspicious, but to me, it's just an indicator that there is something to show for it, something very big on the horizon. And hopefully that announcement is sooner rather than later, and maybe, and hopefully at the Summer Games Fest show. Resident Evil 9 is yet another game I think has a very good chance at being shown at the Summer Games Fest. It has been a good handful of years since we've seen the last mainline Resident Evil game, 4 years to be exact, and reportedly Resident Evil 9 has been in development since around 2017, and this is about right after Resident Evil 7. Now obviously the development has seen a lot of changes since then. However, the game's development saw a major reboot in 2021, and this was right around the time Resident Evil Village had released. In more recent news, Resident Evil insider Dust Golem took to Twitter to respond to a question from a user who asks if the next Resident Evil game will be in first person. And they pretty much confirmed, like, yeah, Resident Evil 9 is going to be designed in third person, and that was always the intention from the beginning. And for me, I actually got into Resident Evil fairly late into the game with Resident Evil 7. I'm someone who started with the first person games, and I love those games a lot, but I also love the third person style as well. And I love what they're doing with the remakes, and I think it's because of these remakes that they're like, let's just go back and try third person once again. I think it is only a matter of time until we finally get a glimpse at Resident Evil 9, and I think the best possible spot to see it, and showing it at what is now the biggest summer gaming event we have, I think it's really a no-brainer. Now on to the game that I think is most likely not going to show up here, but I think it's worth talking about anyway, is Persona 6. Yet another highly anticipated game that hasn't even been revealed or shown yet. Persona 6 remains a ghost that everybody knows is coming, but the question remains, when exactly are we going to see it? Now, at the very least, I think something like a teaser could work at a Summer Games Fest, but honestly speaking, I think Persona 6 is just one of those games that would be better suited towards being shown at something like the Game Awards, especially with just the sheer amount of eyes on that show every single year. year. Persona 6 being one of the big surprise reveals at the show would be huge, not only for the fans, but for the game in general. But either way, if we saw Persona 6 at Summer Games Fest, I would not be complaining whatsoever. But overall, I think the likelihood of that happening is pretty low. I do believe that in place of Persona 6, we will see the reveal of a Persona 4 remake this year. And if it's a game that's supposed to come out at the end of this year, then I could absolutely see it being revealed at Summer Games Fest. Obviously, we did have the big leak, really a confirmation that the game is real and it's something that is coming very soon. Both Persona 3 Reload and this Persona 4 remake are really preparations for their next mainline title. So if Persona 4 remake is coming out this year, then I do think that Persona 6 is right around the corner, maybe next year or 2027. If Persona 6 is following recent release patterns when you're talking about the in-between release from Persona 4 to Persona 5 being 8 years. And now currently the gap between Persona 5 and right now is pretty much 8 years as we're speaking. I think it is also possible that we could be seeing something of Persona 6 pretty soon, or even seeing it released within the next year or two. But as far as seeing anything Persona 6 related at Summer Games Fest, I will not hold my breath, but I do think a Persona 4 remake will be revealed. Now on the opposite end, a game I actually think has a chance of being shown is a smaller game that is Final Fantasy Tactics Remastered. Much like Final Fantasy IX Remake, Tactics has a bunch of rumors and leaks that have been floating around for years. And seeing as it's been, 4 years since we've seen the very first leaks of both Final Fantasy IX Remake and Final Fantasy Tactics Remastered, I honestly, at this point, they could show anything and I'd be extremely happy with whatever even if it was a screenshot. But I know a lot of people are just very tired of hearing leaks, hearing rumors. They just want to see the actual game, and I am the same way. Looking at the Square Enix pipeline, it doesn't look like they have many big heavy hitters planned for this year or even next year. At least that's seemingly how it is right now, but there could always be some type of surprise announcements such as this Tactics remaster. And it's really these smaller games that I think could really hold us down until Square Enix could finally get those big heavy hitters out into the wild. But if we're talking about Final Fantasy Tactics or Final Fantasy IX Remake being shown here, I definitely think it's the former that has a better chance of being at this event, and I really hope that's the case. Now, another one that I think may have a chance, a sliver of a chance to show up at this event is Kingdom Hearts 4. Do I think it's going to happen, considering the history with these games? Absolutely not. Now, there is always a likelihood that it could be here, but I do find it funny because Jeff Keighley really understands just how much people want to see this game. And it's not like Jeff Keighley is a stranger to the sheer amount of demand or even Kingdom Hearts, or the fact that Kingdom Hearts has a history of being shown at his events. Could the man really pull it off and somehow finally get Kingdom Hearts 4 at his show? Though it is a very tricky situation given that we did get a new look at Kingdom Hearts 4 not too long ago. It wasn't a trailer and it wasn't anything too big, but what it was a collage of different images from the game that the community just went absolutely ballistic for. Though I can't help but think that the Kingdom Hearts team just dropped these images as a way to get the fans to chill, to be like, yeah, we showed something, now leave us alone for a good year. I really hope that's not the case because at the very least, I think we should at least see another trailer or something after, 3 years of waiting. But then again, it is Kingdom Hearts we're talking about here, so probably not. But overall, I think all of the games that I talked about here have either been in development for a very long time, or games that we could expect to see or see released within the next year or two. And like I said, I would be extremely happy either way if we saw any one of these games at the event. I do believe that Resident Evil 9 is one that is just around the corner, something that I think is most likely to be seen at this event, and I really do hope that we see it. Anyways, tell me how you guys feel about this down below. Do you feel like any of these games are too unrealistic, or do you think that there is a chance that we'll see at least one of these games get revealed? Tell me some of the games that you're personally looking forward to, some games that you want to see revealed at the Summer Games Fest. And with all of that said, I will catch you guys in the next one.